Okay, well, my name is Jacob Ross, and I am a writer, and I work as an editor at People Tree Press uh, in Leeds. And I've also done some work with Ingrid and hope to continue working with her. And Ingrid is one of the, to use a cliche, rising stars in literature, not just Caribbean literature. She is from Trinidad. Her roots are in Trinidad, and her writing, in particular, her last novel, it really focuses on Trinidad and the kinds of narratives, the kind of preoccupations and themes that I think are very much a part of contemporary Trinidad at the moment. Um, so I just want to say congratulations
Thank
on winning the Costa Prize, the Costa First Novel Prize with your book Love After Love. It's a wonderful novel, and I there are some convergence between both that novel, which has just won the Costa Prize, and your previous short story, the one that won the Commonwealth Writers Prize in 2017. You began working in your 40s. You began writing, sorry, in your 40s. You moved from studying law to teaching law, then to fine arts, then started all over again with a brand new and now successful career in writing. You won the Commonwealth Short Story Prize, as I said, in 2017, the BBC National Short Story Prize in 2018 with a story called Sweet Sop. In 2019, your novel Love After Love was sold to Faber and One World Random House in the USA. And now in 2021, the year hardly begins, and Love After Love has won the Costa First Novel Award. So it's like you want to take everything, right? I cool with that. How useful was winning these the short story prizes to you, to your trajectory as a writer, and how has this impacted on, if at all, on your trajectory and on your writing life, so to speak?
Thanks, Jacob. You know, the Commonwealth Short Story Prize is something that I hold dear to my heart. It has given so many writers from the region, the Caribbean region, and elsewhere in the Commonwealth, a moment where their writing can be seen on an international stage, and more importantly, that they might get some confidence in themselves as writers, to start thinking of themselves as writers. And I never thought of myself as a writer until the moment that I won that Commonwealth Prize. So it's incredibly important to me that that happened. And of course, it also opened a lot of doors. You and I met because of that, and you know, our mentorship has evolved out of that prize. I was wondering if you wanted me to do a reading from the Sweet Sop.
Yes, thank you. You've taken the word out of my mouth.
So,
Thank you. Go ahead.
so the Sweet Sop is a story about a father and son coming to terms with a broken relationship, and they do it through the odd medium of chocolate. And the father's quite ill at this point, and the son is his chocolate dealer. So I'm going to read from about the middle of the story. Instead, the memory of chocolate made the man crazy to see me. I became Reggie's dealer. He had to put in his orders without Kim knowing, so I would get calls at all kind of strange hours. A voice on the phone would whisper, "To Kit Kat," and hang up. The bathroom was a favorite hiding place. I could hear water falling in the background and then his voice hissing, "Snickers, king size." After a few weeks, he say he easing back on the sugar, so he only want Bourneville dark chocolate. Who he fooling? 2 days later, he begging me, "Please, bring a Galaxy caramel bar." He can't take the bitter taste. Then he had worries about the ingredients in chocolate. I should bring something organic. When I told him the organic chocolate was real money, he said, "Forget that. We don't know for sure if organic better. And besides, He going to dead soon. This secret chocolate handover was our special sin. Everybody know that a little secret sinning sweet too bad. If you don't agree, I know you lying through your teeth. In them sinning moments, Reggie softened, forgot his constant pain, and fought to fight, and forgot to fight the big C. He even forgot to fight me. Plus, something else happened. He would be eating a Bounty Bar or Hershey's Kisses, and just so he would start giving me the lowdown on growing up in the countryside and leaving school with only a couple subjects. His parents thought he was a joker with no brains, and he believed them. He said for years he felt like he lost his soul. But his uncle took him in and got him a place at the technical school in San Fernando. Reggie said that was a debt he could never fully repay. Since then, he never wanted for work.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I was really struck by the story, because it is ostensibly about chocolate. And it's very clear to me that you're an expert on the different kinds of chocolates you find in Trinidad. I mean, I was amazed at the variety and the detailed description of those. But in fact, it is a story about the relationship between a son and a father. Uh, a son who has, in a way, not been fathered by his father. So there's a kind of presumptuousness, I would suggest, on the part of the father who has never been a father, as I said, to this boy, but in his decline, he fully expects the son to cater to his every need. Now, what I think fascinated me about the story, and probably one of the great attractions to it, certainly for the judges and for me, was that another writer would have been tempted to bring a kind of moral lens to this to the story. Maybe the father getting his comeuppance, father, but he didn't do that. It is not about vengefulness. In the end, what we have is an expression of some kind of compassion and humanity. And I think that also I find in your novel, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on. But I was really struck by the way you use that story to make a statement about relationships. How important was that to you? I mean, was that something that you planned, or did it just happen like that while you were writing your story sometimes? Yeah.
So I think, Jacob, one of the things about coming to writing later on in life is that you know that there are no easy answers to any of life's problems, and there are no right and wrong answers. So all I can ever hope for is to show compassion for my characters and for them to try and live with grace. And if you're going for those two things, then you don't have a moral story to tell. You're just kind of going through what is it that life has presented them and how are they best coping. So it's deliberate only because I don't know how to write any other way. Maybe a younger me would have written something different.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful. The treatment that I find in your stories, and the kind of sensitivity that you bring and to your characters. I began to notice when I reread Sweet Sop, lots of points of convergence between that story, almost as if it's the kernel of something. Um, Between that particular story and your novel, Love After Love. Both novels turn around the secret. Slim's secret is a knowledge of exactly how his father died. And it's clear that that has some kind of impact on him because he begins to eat and, begins to get physically very big. And there's an irony in the name Slim, of course. And later on, um, in Love After Love, we have Solo's discovery of his mother Betty's big secret, which has a tremendous impact on him. In fact, it sends him spinning or reeling. So I want to talk. It's a wonderful dramatic tool. It's a wonderful device that you use, and you do it very effectively here. The idea of a narrative turning around the secret. Now, tell me a bit about building the book and the challenges you faced. Did you have any doubts about its possible success? Did you think that that approach will work? Tell me a little bit about your process as a writer writing that book.
So first of all, there was no presumption that it would be successful. I had no idea, but I remember from workshops with you that the key thing I took away that stays with me always is that the middle of the book should not sag. Do not have a sagging middle. And so I needed, something that would drive the middle of the book. And this is what I kind of came up with. I always knew there'd be a secret, but the ability to drive it that much kind of came in the writing. Each of the characters, I almost had to write them on their own and then splice them and then rewrite the whole thing, because it was hard to jump from one storyline to the next and keep the level of emotion and kind of just enveloping, the characters. So that was hard. I planned a bit, but not a lot. I'd often stop and reflect on where I'd reached in the plot, think about if it's sagging or not, and then go back to it. So I kind of plotted out from the beginning.
I think it is one of the most valuable things that any novelist can learn to avoid, which is, I talk about it all the time, mid-novel sag, not having, and once you get that, I think, you well on the way. Now, one reviewer described Love After Love, and this can also be applied to Sweet Sop, and I quote, as a narrative set in a veritable Garden of Eden of beauty, but blighted with a darkness that lurks below the surface. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that darkness. Why or whether you think it's necessary to address this darkness. And by darkness, I think that reviewer was referring to abusive relationships, judgmentalism, bigotry, homophobia. And I know that are Caribbean writers who have addressed this, in subtle ways and sometimes in very sort of, open, not unambiguous ways and stuff. But I want you to talk to me a little bit about your conceptualization of your character, Mr. Chetin. Yeah, your approach as a Caribbean writer. Why did you choose to give that narrative thread such centrality in your book? And also, there is homophobia also expressed very subtly, very quietly in Sweet Sop. I don't remember when his father said he called it. I don't remember what his father called him. But
his father called him a bulla man because
a bulla man, exactly. Yes, exactly. Exactly. So you have that, and these themes, these very small elements, get transferred and amplified in this magnificent novel, Love After Love. So tell me a little bit about your attitude to it. What you were doing there. Yeah, share it.
So I think your question raises a few different points, and so I'll try to cover them. The first thing is that is the homophobia, and I think that in one of my lives I was very concerned with human rights law, and so I think that remains with me, that wherever I kind of see human rights violations, I'm drawn to kind of unpicking them. So this one was just itching to be picked, because we're in 2021. There is just no reason for the kinds of state sanctioned or religious sanctioned bigotry that we find, and discrimination.
Yes. How much of a problem is it in the place where you set the story with Trinidad? And I'm wondering if because people tend to think of the Caribbean in a kind of broad generic sense, almost as one would say Great Britain, as being uniformly homophobic, but when I was in Trinidad and also in other parts of the Caribbean where I have been, there is a gay culture, and it gets tolerated to a certain extent, or it gets slammed very hard at another level. But I think that it's a far more nuanced than we make it out to be, I think. But that's just my thing. I don't know what your
No,
thoughts are
no,
on
I
that.
think you're right. And I wasn't able to kind of bring out those nuances enough, but I hint at them.
Yes.
The idea that the urban gay person has access to a culture and support network that the rural, Indian
Yeah.
boy from San Fernando does not have, and a
Yes.
confidence he does not have. So yes, there are subtleties within them, and really it does seem to spin on socioeconomic factors. I think in Jamaican society as well, you can quite clearly see not just a tolerance, but in fact an indulgence in, the arts, for example. That
Yes.
that space is okay to be
Yes.
a queer person, but don't bring it into teaching my children.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
so there are all of those subtleties that
Yes.
are there, and I'm sure other writers will be kind of picking up on these things and coming through with more themes.
I think one of the achievements with that particular character, Mr. Cheaton, is the fact that he is so human, so real, so empathetic. I do think it's a genuine achievement, and it's a magnificent achievement. And I admire that enormously. Let's talk a little bit about one of the big areas of debate still among writers who write from the Caribbean space, and that is language. The language of your book is very lyrical, it's beautiful, it's sensuous, it's sinuous. There's a lot of pleasure to be had from it. Another Trinidadian woman writer who does that is Barbara Jenkins. Very, very beautiful evocation, exploitation of the Trinidadian idiom. Trinidadian. Now, there are three big questions that attach to this because the first one is, did you have any pushback on that by readers in the wider world, by Trinidadians, because it's a Trinidadian book? Yeah, that's the first one. I want you to kind of address that. I think your decision to write that book, because you're not just writing dialogue as so many writers have done before. In a way, it's reminiscent of the kind of Sam Selvon approach, where the narrative itself, in addition to the dialogue, is also in a kind of Trinidadian Creole. Now, so what was the reasoning, or what were the reasonings behind you making that choice? Because in my view, it is an artistic choice. It's a choice that, okay, because that choice could either be exclusivist or inclusivist. It's really quite an interesting area to talk about.
Yep.
And the third one, and they all kind of connected, is that I happen to know that you made a decision that you were going to read your own work for the audiobook edition of Love After Love. So talk to me about, and you didn't want nobody else who not from your kind of cultural space and, to do that. So kind of give me a little bit of a response to that, and we should be all right.
Great. So I'll deal with the audiobook first because it's an easy one.
Okay.
It's I'm not possessive about the book. I feel, once it's finished and it goes and has its own life. But I was damned if it was going to be mispronounced at all. And I didn't want an actor kind of learning, that Cedrus is pronounced Cedrus rather than some other way, Cedro or something. I didn't think I could tolerate that. So I was very bolshy, and I said, I must do it. And really, that was such a difficult task. I ain't going to volunteer to do many things again in the studio. It was sort of 4.5 days of being in a basement and just working, and it was really hard. But I had a brilliant team, and most people who have listened to it say they've enjoyed it.
I think it's excellent, but also I think that you're sort of skirting around probably a consideration. But I'll tell you my experience. My experience is for the last book I did and the one before that, where an audio book was done. I heard the reader reading it. The reader is a black Londoner, an actor and stuff. And there was an assumption that because it's a Caribbean character, the character must be speaking in Jamaican with a Jamaican accent. And I literally had some issues with that because I said, well, that happened. It's part of the kind of stereotyping, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So that, for example, every West African is Nigerian, or every Caribbean person is a
Absolutely.
Jamaican. And I
Yeah.
think that there are writers out there who we love, the Jamaican language is musicality and beauty, but it's also a cliche that I think people have to kind of move away from. And I don't know if that was part of your
Well, I
part of your
didn't want
feeling.
to say it, but yes, when Sweet Sop was produced by the BBC, the actor was not a Trini actor.
Yeah,
It wasn't read in a Trini accent,
yeah,
and that annoyed me.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
so I wanted a Trini accent, and I didn't want a London Trini accent. I wanted a
Right.
Trini accent,
Okay.
and I thought, well, that's got to be me. But you also, I'm dealing with the slightly easier ones, and then we'll go to the more difficult ones. Pushback.
Hmm.
I have been incredibly lucky, and again, I don't want you to blush, but it goes back to our time together when I won that Commonwealth Short Story Prize. In that workshop where we talked about owning our work, and I really felt very strongly that the prize had been given, and these judges were saying it's okay to do what you're doing, and that gave me a huge amount of confidence. So I don't explain or translate at all in the book, and I feel that the integrity of the language and the context should be enough. So pushback. I was very lucky. My agent believed in the book. She had no problem with the language, and I never had any one of the publishers who bid for the book discuss anything about the language other than they loved it.
Yeah.
So
Wonderful.
no
Wonderful.
pushback there. And in terms of the readers, so here's the thing, I don't read reviews, because if you read reviews, your mental health will go crazy. It's like up, down, up, down. I'm like, no. So I don't read reviews, but when I've kind of done Zooms with book clubs and things, people might say to me they had a little, they took a little while, maybe 50 pages to kind of get into the rhythm of the book. And once they were in, they were in. So hopefully, that holds true.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the third part, which was your second question in terms of language, was the approach of writing the whole thing, the prose and the dialogue, rather than limiting the Trini Creole to dialogue. And I think, I never thought that the book could be authentic any other way than the way I wrote it. Because it's written in first person, you're inside the person's head. They're not going to think one way and then speak another. So they had to be in the same kind of language and register. So I couldn't think of any other way. And I'm so comfortable in that I don't know that I want to write any other way.
Yes. I think it's a wonderful, I think it's one of the USPs, the unique selling points of the book. For me, that added to the excitement of the narrative. the fact that you bring a fresh language and a fresh approach to the book. And I saw in some of the reviews, I saw you have on Goodreads, you have 334 reviews and over 2,000 ratings, which you have to multiply by about 10 to work out how many books you sold, and how rich you become as a result of all of that, which is fantastic. But people were literally trying to write their reviews in in Trinidad and English, Trinidad and Creole, because yeah,
Lovely.
they enjoyed it. They enjoyed it so much. Many of them did. There were a couple of Trinidadians who felt, as per usual, that they were not represented because not all Trinidadians talk like that or do that. But it's not. But it's what we call the burden of representation. So many, because writers coming from our kinds of cultural spaces, um, readers, back home, so to speak, have these very high expectations. What they really, some of them really want is a tourist brochure, and not really a novel that looks at the underbelly of the society. So I understand that. But the book, as we see, is doing fantastically well. Now, if there's one thing I've noticed over the past 5, maybe 10 years, is the emergence of, one, women writers from the Caribbean, two, Trinidadian female writers in the Caribbean. Uh, and I would go as far as to say that, you are at the forefront of a very exciting movement now in the Caribbean. And I'm just going to run through some names just to kind of, substantiate what I'm saying. And these are writers from Trinidad. There is Claire Adams, there is you, Ingrid Persaud, there is Monique Roffrey, Sharon Miller, Merle Hodge, Brian McIver, Elizabeth Nunez, Ayana Gillian Lloyd, and I'm not even mentioning those, and forgive me, those whose name are not mentioned here. I'm just giving a sense of it. I'm not mentioning those whose work I'm looking forward to, like Ira Mathur, Alake, and just off the top of my head. So I'm seeing the emergence of something, of a new wave. And I'd love to know your thoughts on that.
So, the Costa has been taken over by Trini women, right? So Monique
Exactly.
Roffrey wins, best novel, and I get, the first novel award. So we were invited to a Zoom call with colleagues in Trinidad to celebrate. And apart from one man, they were all women writers.
Exactly.
And it was fabulous. And we don't know if it's something in the water, but we're all just kind of geared up and we're ready. And I think it is that we feel it's our time. We feel that we no longer need to seek permission. We feel that with the death of Walcott and Naipaul, that we have a reasonable run at it now. And so we're going for it.
For the first time in my life, I wish I was a Trinidadian woman writer. I said, boy, that's where the party is happening. But it's fantastic, and I'm really happy about that. I love the idea of I love what I call the disruptive element in the writing. So absolutely nobody expected you to just come up, from the side and just boom, just take center stage. With Monique's book, again, and I love that kind of disruptive element to the writing that we're experiencing at the moment. You really don't know where the next book, big Caribbean stroke Trini book is going to come from. You really don't know. And I love that. So it's something that's worth celebrating. Now I have one last question. I have 1,000 questions, but I'll just ask you one last one before we go. Now, there's this author who I don't know his name. But I met him just recently. I don't know him really well, but there's a quote by him. His name is Jacob Ross. He says that sometimes the book we write teach us something about ourselves or about life or about others. Did you learn anything new from Love After Love?
Oh. Well, I didn't know. I didn't write the book I thought I was writing, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know how preoccupied I was with the same issues as I had been with Sweet Sop. And it was a recognition at the end that I'll always be writing the same book and I'll just be trying to get it better. And that's really terrible for people who will read.
It's not terrible. It's not, but that's what writers do generally. But it's a wonderful response, and perhaps the best I've gotten from anybody I've asked, this question. Yeah, and it feels true. It sounds true because that's my experience too as a writer. Ingrid, it's been a marvelous talking to you.
Oh, it's been
A
a
real pleasure. And of course, there has to be another question. What next? I mean, what next? Apart from the movie of the book and all that stuff, what next?
Absolutely. If Oprah is listening, it's time to buy the movie rights.
Have you got another book in mind? Is there anything that you...
Well, Chinese have a saying, don't put goat mouth on
Yeah, exactly. Grenadians have it too, I promise you. So culturally, you need to go to Grenada to see how much Trini there is in Grenada, how much Grenada there is in Trinidad.
All your teeth fitting. But
we say the inverse, but that's fine.
So I am, Jacob, here's the thing. I am always working. I always have 2-3 little short stories bubbling away on the laptop. And I have a bigger piece that they're trying a thing.
Yeah.
But it's early days, so it's hard to give you anything more than that. But I'm working.
Yeah, stick with it. Stay with it because it's good. It's good so far, and it's going to be good again. There's a lot. You just start and look at how much damage you're doing out there already. Just imagine in a couple of years' time, they just mash up the whole place. Honestly, I really genuinely think that from the moment I read the book, the manuscript, I didn't have time to do a blurb for it and stuff like that, and I really apologize. I've regretted it anyway. But anyway, I just knew that this one is a runner. What your book, and this is something that I suppose writers should think about because it never fails, which is this, that a novel is first and foremost a story. And a story is first and foremost about relationships. And if we get that right, then in many ways, we have done 80% of the work. It's the relationships and the fact that it is a story. So all the kind of intellectual gymnastics that some writers tend to do, and and the kind of intertextual referencing, that's like putting a little bit of dusting sugar on the cake. But you want the cake, and the cake is a story, and that's what you and Monique have done, and that, in my view, explains also the great appeal of the book, and of course, it's the way you executed it, which was absolutely magnificent. So I think it's just a wonderful thing.
And those things I learned at your feet. So thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Oh, I feel very, like my Jamaican friends say, honored.
Take care.